owner.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, and I'll be your host for the program, which is produced in cooperation with MD Coaches, a company dedicated to developing and empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Well, today I'm excited to share an interview that I did with Dr. Marion Mass, who is not only a practicing pediatrician, she's also a passionate advocate for healthcare issues that affect both physicians and patients. In fact, it was in that role that she became a co-founder of Practicing Physicians of America. Dr. Mass was a magna cum laude graduate of Penn State University with a major in biology and a minor in classics. And from there, she went on to get her MD from Duke University School of Medicine. Her postgraduate training in pediatrics was done at Northwestern University Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. She currently lives with her cardiologist husband in central Pennsylvania, where they have raised 3 children, and she is a very accomplished organic gardener. So now let's hear my conversation with Dr. Marion Mass. So I'm very excited today to be talking with Dr. Marion Mass, who is a pediatrician up in the Philadelphia area and has some really interesting things to talk to us about in terms of the professional association that she co-founded. So Marion, thank you so much for being with us today, and welcome to Prescription for Success.
What a pleasure. I love to talk.
Well, that's good. You've come to exactly the right place. And as we usually do on Prescription for Success, we're going to start at the beginning. And I'm interested to know where you got your inspiration to go to medical school. Is that what you had in mind when you started your undergraduate education at Penn State?
It sure was. So, gutting squirrels. Did anyone ever say that before?
Well, they do in Alabama, and that's where I am.
Okay. So I grew up in a little town in Pennsylvania, and I'm the only daughter, and I've got 4 brothers, and my father was a hunter. I used to go out with him, and it wasn't just the squirrels. I hate to say it was the rabbits because I have a rabbit now, but he would bring home the animals, and I was just fascinated to find the liver and the kidneys and look at the entrails and see what was inside the entrails. Yes, my mother was absolutely aghast.
So you were fascinated by the anatomy.
Yeah.
And wanted to know what a human looked like on the inside.
Early on I thought to myself that I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I don't remember the television show, but I watched a television program where a lawyer had to defend someone that was guilty, and I was blown away. And I thought, that's not for me. So if you weren't going to be a lawyer and you wanted to do something, you were going to be a doctor. And
well, we're very fortunate that you made that choice. So things must have gone well for you in your scientific studies. You were a magna graduate of Penn State in cellular biology.
Actually, it was biology, but I did a lot of cellular classes.
I see. But I'm also kind of interested. You also have a minor in classical studies. So tell me where that interest came from.
Yeah, so I never traveled. I never got on a plane until I was 17. I was one of 5. We were not exceptionally well off. My brothers all did all kinds of camping trips with Boy Scouts and stuff, and I didn't really get to go anywhere other than the Jersey Shore, an occasional trip to Washington, D.C. And that's okay. I had a wonderful childhood. I'm not complaining. But when I was 17, my parents just dropped an itinerary for a trip to Italy in front of me and said, "Would you like to do this?" And I was floored. It was a college course. My Latin teacher and I still keep in touch with her incidentally. my Latin teacher had suggested me for the trip, and I went off to Italy and learned about architecture and history and a deep dive on mythology. And I fell in love with traveling, and I was in love with the classics. And so I became a classical minor at Penn State. My junior year, I discovered I could graduate early. And the day I found that out, I went to my Greek history class, and the professor announced that they were starting a trip for study abroad in Greece. And I went to the office of study abroad and got the application and called my parents that night. You want a funny side story about this?
Absolutely.
Okay. So when I called my parents, my father answered. This is back in the days when people didn't have speakerphones and stuff. And when I told my dad what I wanted to do, he said, "Why the heck would you want to go to a crap hole like Europe?" My father was a big American, everything USA first, And my mother grabbed the phone from my father and said, "Ed, you stay out of this," and said, "Marion, you should definitely apply." As it turns out, it cost me several $1,000s less to live in Greece, and I traveled all over Greece, and I saw Greece before the riots and such, and I saw the Oracle of Delphi, and I saw the starting line for the Olympics in ancient Greece, and hiked up to Mycenae where the Lion's Gate is. I mean, that was my last semester of college. The very first morning in Athens, I've always been able to not sleep. I'm very good at not sleeping, and still doing fine. I was jet lagged. Everyone was jet lagged. They were all sleeping in. I couldn't wait. I just woke up and ran like 7 miles right up to the top of the Parthenon. I couldn't wait. So excited. So yes.
That sounds like a really fabulous experience. And I'm interested to know if you think that experience really informed you in such a way that it made you a better physician ultimately, or just a better person. What do you think?
Oh, so much better. And it's probably also responsible for my meeting the love of my life. So why?
It's not a bad deal.
Yeah, no. I got to take a break. I was like so heck bent on studying, and everything was, I was doing research and in college and such. And this was a break before medical school started, and a break from science. And I think studying liberal arts is still so important. Our 2 children are in college now, and they're both at schools where the liberal arts are emphasized, and neither of them want to go into them. My husband's a surgeon, and he was a literature major at undergrad at Vanderbilt. And when we met in medical school, we actually didn't date for several years, but when we met, we would talk about literature and we would talk about classical things, and we still do. So we honeymooned in Sicily, which is cheaper than most of Italy, but we were poor residents at the time. So yeah, I think we were attracted to each other because of that, love of the classics.
I obviously started medical school a good bit sooner than you did, and at the time that I was making my presentation, my preparations, we were strongly advised to get a good liberal arts education prior to going into medical school. And my impression nowadays is that tradition has kind of faded. Maybe you can tell me if I've got that right or wrong, but it appears to me that a lot of pre-med curricula nowadays are very much science directed, and the liberal arts have sort of faded into the background. Am I getting that right? Or
I guess I can't speak for everywhere. I think at the high school and the elementary school level, I think they dabble in public schools. My kids are all public school products. 2 have graduated, as I mentioned, one's still in. Our schools have been extraordinary, especially at the secondary levels in science and math. And there's pockets of really wonderful teachers in terms of history and English, pockets of it. I think they're terrible. I hate to say it. I think they're terrible at teaching writing. Steve actually did some stuff with them.
Well,
once in a while in the
you
summer.
shouldn't hate to say it. I think it's something that needs to be amplified. So go ahead and say that it's not good and tell us.
Yeah,
how
no,
we can fix it.
yeah. No, it's not a good trend that I think we are it's somewhat, we are dumbing down some of what kids are learning in history
Mm-hmm.
and what they're learning in writing. What I take issue with is there's a lack of creativity. They have to go
Right.
towards a rubric and they really can't step off the rubric. And then I think that stifles them. And especially, like I remember in elementary school, we had this conversation with our oldest just recently. He's a junior at Dartmouth and he's an engineering major, but he actually loves the classics himself. He's read all of the Odyssey and he's read Paradise Lost and that was on his own. He's read the whole Bible too. You know, who does that?
Wow.
He did that in 8th grade. But he struggled with writing when he was in elementary school. I mean, he struggled.
Mm-hmm.
And he told us that he was always confused because they were always trying to put him into a box. And he just felt like he had different ideas and he couldn't get in their box. I think that's a problem in public school education, elementary. It might be in private too. I don't know. At the university level, both of our kids are in smaller schools. They really emphasize they want them to have a broad education. I think they were attracted to that. I can't speak for other schools. So
Yeah. Well, let's hope that tradition doesn't go away entirely. But moving along, next step for you was medical school at Duke. And now you had already, as you said, you had met your spouse toward the end of your undergraduate studies. Were you married when you started medical school?
No. No, I met him in medical school. So,
oh, I see. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We met in first year medical school, but we didn't date for the first several years. So we became friends, and then all of a sudden we started dating. And but medical school itself was just such a wonderful journey.
Well, that's what I want to know some more about. Did you find it easier, more difficult, about the same as undergraduate school? What was the medical school experience like for you?
I think I was less stressed in medical school. In part, probably going to Greece helped. Like I sort of felt like, now I'm here, and I learned for the sake of the passion of wanting to know about the disease processes and learning anatomy. And not just that, but I have wonderful classmates. We just had our 25th year reunion. We hold the record for like reunion and attendance. They tell us that every time we have a reunion. Yes.
How about that?
You want to hear a cute story? This is great.
I do. That's why we're here.
So, I mean, we just had such a good time. I have lifelong friends from medical school. My best friend and roommate, this is adorable. Like one Valentine's Day, we baked Linzer Heart cookies. We dressed all in red. We put masks across our faces. And then we snuck into homes of men in our class, and we gave them a lipstick kiss on each cheek, and then took a photo of us masked with our red, with said gentleman. And I mean, we just had the best time. We were the Valentine's Day kissing bandits, but in a very innocent sense, of course, right?
I would like to have been a gentleman in that class. That's nice.
So in any case, one of the gentlemen in the class had not shown up for any of the reunions, and a friend of mine had pointed that out, and I said, I'll take care of this. And so I'm on the reunion committee, and I sent out an email to as many emails as I had from our class. And I started the email and said, hey, Jay, you really need to come to the reunion, because if you don't, my roommate and I from medical school are going to personally come to your home and rough you up and then bring you to the reunion, and we'll film the whole thing and put it on social media. So I think you better show up.
I bet he did.
He did.
Yeah, that would be hard to turn down. So it sounds like medical school was rather enjoyable for you. I remember it as a time that I enjoyed, but quite a bit of pressure. And the other thing that was substantially different is in my class, my freshman class of 125, I don't think we had more than about 20 women. So a completely different experience from that standpoint. And I presume that by the time you got there, it would have been unthinkable to have a class that was not almost equally divided between the genders. Am I right about that?
Nope, I'm sorry. We were 70-30, I think. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I seem to remember 70-30.
That's
Duke
interesting.
Duke was a very old-fashioned place, but I think
true.
There were good things about it. So, we talked about a classical education for children. I sort of felt like I got a classical medical education. And, I know everyone talks about nowadays that, medical students, we shouldn't be too hard on them and all the rest on that. They were tough on us. And what I would say is it echoed what I tell my children now: work hard, play hard. That's what we did. And it was tough, but we also learned. I remember, look, Duke is famous in terms of certain departments: surgery, internal medicine. In surgery, like David Sabiston, who wrote the book on surgery, and I know
I was going to say you would have probably been there during the Sabiston years. That must have been pretty exciting.
Oh, it was very exciting, but even better than exciting, the 20 medical students that were on the surgical rotation, he would spend, 2 times each week doing a presentation with those medical students. The medical student would present, and then, he would teach us what he knew. I mean, this is the man who wrote the textbook of surgery, and he's hanging out with the medical student. He valued teaching. He wanted us to learn. And more than that, I remember at the beginning of the rotation, and he did this with every group of medical students, he had them over to his home, and he knew he must have looked up information on each of us. And so he would come up and he would say, at the time I was, Marion Siegfried, that's my maiden name, so Miss Siegfried, I see that you studied abroad in Greece, like say he knew facts about you.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was extraordinary, really. And just the friendships that we formed, and, like there's a famous quote from Shakespeare, and I get this from my husband, from one of the Henry plays. He would know which. He's better than me on that front. We have heard the chimes at midnight. What a poignant line. And essentially it's saying that, like, there's things that you do in life with especially the people that you bond with, times in your life that are just so memorable. And that's when that applies. We have heard the chimes at midnight.
And what a great place to have that reinforced is right in the middle of your professional education. And
absolutely.
From a guy with the stature of David Sabiston, that's a great story. So as you moved along, I noticed that in conjunction, I presume this was in conjunction with your medical school experience, you spent some time with the Native American Health Service. I'd like to know some more about that.
Yeah, I chose to go out, and I was on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. I did a month out there. It was stunning. It's in Montana, right near the Battle of Little Bighorn. And I trained for a marathon out there. It's a little bit up in elevation and 95 degrees, no humidity. I would run at lunch every day for an hour and a half.
Good place to train.
Oh, fantastic. I came home, and Steve and I were dating at this point, and my husband's actually a long distance runner. He was a little frightened of running with me at that point. He still could beat me, but as he put it, you are now Montana strong.
So what was it like working with the Native Americans? I'm assuming that the ready access to health care in that environment is not the same as it is elsewhere in the U.S. Tell us about that.
Well, they actually have, it's free healthcare. It's right there. I think the things that I observed, for the first time, I saw deep distrust. Patients would come in, they would have a problem, but then they would tell you, well, I don't trust Western medicine, and, I have this sinus infection, and I don't know that I want to go on antibiotics. Or I should, let me rephrase this one. I have sinus inflammation and I don't want to be on antibiotics, or I don't know that I want to take medication X that you're suggesting because I don't trust Western medicine. And this is interesting because I've been having a lot of discussions about trust in the healthcare system lately. Look at our current situation with declining rates of vaccination and the anti-vax movement. And I'm not one to think that we should mandate vaccinations. I do support them. My children are vaccinated. They're vaccinated nearly fully. We didn't get the rotavirus when they were babies, because babies spit that out. And at that point, there was some question about intussusception with rotavirus. We waited until there was a 9-valent available for HPV, and I think that's okay. I think that to mandate vaccinations is a mistake. And I also think it's a mistake when physicians refuse to take the time, or actually a mistake for physicians to kick patients out of their practice who are unvaccinated. I understand it's the physician's right to do it. I think we would be much better served if physicians had more time to spend with patients and could explain to them fully, this is why I am suggesting you get vaccinated. But look, healthcare it's very personal, isn't it? And
it is.
If you don't have a relationship with your doctor, and we're certainly losing that because we're losing time spent with physicians, time spent between patients and physicians. When you lose that, then you lose the trust. And then you get into a dangerous situation where you will have people that will choose not to be vaccinated. And then before you know it, you have a measles outbreak on your hands.
That is really a very interesting philosophical question. And I don't even want to begin for us to try to solve it here. But if I can offer a little bit of my perspective from quite a number of years, I grew up in an era where children were getting polio. And when you have that sort of thing all around you, it is a little easier to say everybody on this planet should be getting polio vaccine because the results of that infection were incredibly crippling and incredibly tragic. And, because of the generalized agreement that was how we were going to do it in the 1950s, it did gradually become more and more of a thing that ought to be done. And if you didn't do it, you were committing malpractice. But you make a very good point. It's probably wrong of us to force anybody to take any medicine that they don't want to. But it is also very important to understand some of the things that have preceded us in terms of terrible epidemic illnesses, and we just should always be mindful of that. Am I on the right track here or not?
I think so. I think we need to know our history, right?
Absolutely.
And, and then we have to accept that patients, they're not always going to fall into boxes and just fall into line. I mean, we certainly don't fall into line easily as physicians. And I think you are more than on the right track.
Okay. All right. Well, we will move along from the philosophical into the practical and talk about your postgraduate experience. And again, the idea that you would be a pediatrician, is that something that was sort of predetermined for you at the beginning of medical school, or did it develop later on?
Oh, heavens, no. Life is a path, right? And it's a long distance race, not a sprint. When I started medical school, I had an NIH fellowship. I was going to do an MD and a PhD. I had done a lot of research as an undergrad, and I had a full ride to Duke. And then in Duke, we do 1 year of basic science, a long year, and then we go into our clinical rotations. And my first was medicine, and then I did pediatrics. And I was already getting this inkling as I was in medicine, and it was solidified in pediatrics. And the inkling was this, I went into medical school thinking I was going to be a researcher. I hit clinical care, and I fell in love with taking care of patients. And that feeling of, having someone bring their problem to you and tell you things about them, and not just solving the puzzle, but getting to know that person and finding out things about them and then fixing their problem if you could, or at least making it better.
Nice to be around humans, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I gave up my fellowship, and it was during my pediatrics rotation that I did it. And I was a little scared, it's the first time I ever, I guess you would say, quit something. But it was the right decision. And pediatrics, why? I come from a big family. I'm one of
you
five.
You didn't really quit.
No, but I gave up the fellowship.
What you did was change directions. Yeah.
Well, but when you have never, since the time you were maybe in fourth grade, when you hadn't altered your direction, it was a momentous decision. It also kind of taught me that life lesson that it's okay to alter your path and take a different path.
And that's a good thing to learn, right?
Absolutely. So, why pediatrics? I'm one of five. My parents are each one of eight. I'm fascinated with families and how they work. And I think it's really interesting. I love watching my own kids. I don't want to say too much here, but watching the birth order and the only girl and the youngest and people's personalities and watching them develop as they grew up. I just hung out with a friend yesterday and watched her 3 and 1 year old, and what a pleasure just to see my own children again, little glimmers of them.
I bet. You know what I loved about pediatrics? At least up until, I guess, the age of about 11 or 12, there is absolutely no hypochondriasis at all. If the child is sick, that something is wrong and you need to figure it out. And if they're not, you get out of their way. Is that kind of the way you approached it?
Well, not just that. It's also no guile, and and not only no guile, but I always say to people, kids are plastic. They heal. Of course, when they don't heal, that's the most, that's the worst. That's the
hard
pain.
To take.
Hard to see, hard to take. Oh, so hard.
So how about residency? Was that, did you find that unbearably stressful and exhausting, or did you have fun there like you did in medical school?
It's exhausting. I would say residency was less fun than medical school because you're more responsible. In medical school, you're learning. In residency, you're taking on the responsibility. And, the other hard part, so I was a pediatrics resident. My husband was a surgical resident. At the time, Steve was doing...
so when did the two of you get together?
Oh, it was in medical school.
I bet he was he was absent a lot.
Right. So, in medical school, we were doing the same thing. And it was the end of medical school when we started dating, and then we relocated together to Chicago. He's an ear, nose, and throat surgeon now, but he had to do a surgical internship, and it was substantially more time away than my internship. I mean, my internship was hard, still very hard. But, Steve had 5 months of his intern year. He was every other night call. So he would wake up at 5 a.m, catch the train to, or not train, I guess he would take the bus down to Northwestern, because we lived in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And then he would see patients and, do whatever you did as a resident, and then work all night long, almost always without sleep. I remember one night he had 2 patients code and not make it within an hour when he was doing transplant. And transplant, the patients are so sick. And, you do everything right and they'll still not make it. But to be the person doing chest compressions twice in an hour on 2 young people, I mean, brutal. And then he would be up all night. And then the next day, or going into the next day, he'd just stay there at the hospital. And then he would get home at 8 o'clock that night. So he would have gone from 5 a.m. one day till 8 o'clock the next night. And then I make him dinner and he'd zombify and just, fall asleep. And that was the end of it. And then he'd get up and start the whole process all over again. 5 months were like that. And then the other months were every third night.
And I really don't want to get overly personal with you in that regard, but do you think that sort of lifestyle has the potential to be more stressful on a marriage than perhaps other situations?
Oh, of course.
Can you even talk about it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it does. But I mean, I think if you're going to be married, I mean, people have trouble in their marriage for all sorts of reasons. I've never looked on the numbers. I think maybe I didn't want to. It's higher, I'm sure, among two physicians than in the general population would be my guess. You just have to keep on talking and, find time for each other and do little things that make the marriage keep going. We're 25 years in May, so far it seems to have worked out.
I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Our mission at MD Coaches is to educate, encourage, and empower physicians to be strong healthcare leaders. Our team of certified physician coaches brings real-world experience from their years of medical practice to our coaching clients. Working with physicians at all stages of their professional career, we know what a challenge today's healthcare landscape can present, especially to a new physician just getting started. We work with our clients to find answers and develop strategies that positions them for success. If you're ready to start mapping your own path to professional success, simply go to our website at mymdcoaches.com and send us an email to set up a complimentary session. Remember, at MD Coaches, we see you, we believe in you, and we are here for you.
We'll continue. We were in the discussion of dual residence in the household. So your husband was in a surgical program and you were in pediatrics. Did that mean that you all completed your postgraduate training at different times, or did it come out even?
Oh, no. So I finished 2 years ahead of time, and then I worked for 2 years as a hospitalist in
So you all stayed in Chicago while that was going on.
Yeah,
right.
And then he had 2 more years.
Okay. And then was after he finished his training, is that when you all decided to move back to Pennsylvania?
Yeah. So we were actually looking mid-Atlantic, and we ended up 10 miles from where I grew up by colossal good fortune, I suppose. It was really nice.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and we had our first child. He was born in March, and then we moved back in July. And it was so wonderful for both of my parents, to have, and then the other 2 were, of course, born here in PA. And then I continued work as a hospitalist. I made the conscious decision. It was just easier with 2 doctors to have one person have a schedule that had control. And in a hospitalist job, you do have that. I believe I mentioned earlier, if I didn't, I will now, I'm extraordinarily good at going without sleep and still functioning. So when the kids were little, until the youngest hit first grade, I did almost exclusively nights and weekends. And I just stayed home with my kids.
Wow.
Worked at night, and it was okay. I mean, sometimes I would get sleep at work, and sometimes I would get none. But I will also say, don't feel badly for me. People would say, "How are you doing this?" And I would say, "Well, I meet kids who have chronic medical problems, and their parents will never see the joy of having them walk or talk. Mm-hmm. And I go home to 3 healthy kids. So when I meet those kids, it makes my job look so easy."
I bet. But it's an interesting way to manage the schedule. And indeed, I imagine you were pretty busy. You were at Children's of Philadelphia for your in that time frame. Is that correct?
Well, I worked at a local hospital, and yes. So I worked for a local hospital.
All right. So the hospitalist experience continued up until about 7 years or so ago, and you made the switch into a more general pediatric sort of role? Is what you're doing now? Well, what you were doing between 2013 and 2016?
So in 2012, I left hospitalist work. It was just the nights were too much, and the evenings actually were worse because then the kids needed to be all carted around. So I made the decision based on my family, and then I went into a small. It was kind of like a boutique sort of practice. I worked there for 4 years. It was very enjoyable. The practice ended up having to close. We didn't survive being a small practice. There's a lot of, it's a hardship. I wasn't running the practice. I was an employee of the practice, but it was impossible to maintain an independent practice in the
I would imagine in those years, that was sort of the beginning of the time when it was very difficult for anybody to be in private practice. And I think you would agree that the exit from private practice, the disappearance of private practice has only accelerated. And I'm starting to wonder if it's going to disappear entirely. Was that your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I felt like it. And I think we're having a renaissance of people becoming independent practitioners. But I think for a long time, it was a thing to do for the dinosaurs.
So upon the unfortunate closing of that practice, had you made any preliminary plans, or did you see it coming, or what exactly happened next?
Yeah, I could see it coming. So then I ended up starting employment again and working for a large pediatric hospital system in an urgent care capacity. And I do that still, and I do that part-time. You know what? Honestly, this urgent care shtick is probably my favorite thing that I've done, because I'm taking care of patients who need me and are sick, and many patients can't get access to their primary care doctor. The primary care doctors are too busy. It's hard for them to get appointments. Some patients don't have access because they can't find many physicians who will take Medicaid. And so these are patients that just come in, and they, were needed. And it's allowed me to, I work only part-time in my profession now, part-time for getting paid, I should say. When I saw all of this starting to happen, and I saw what it was like in an independent practice, and even predating that, I had started to study the things that are causing patients not to have access to their physicians, and that are causing patients to be paying more, because that's the trend. They're all paying more and getting less. So I had started writing and speaking at times, and making trips to Harrisburg in Washington, D.C. And along the way, I think I realized I can't do that and work full time as a physician. I know physicians that do that, and they have my, mad respect, because I'm doing part time and doing this advocacy, and it's already feels like a lot.
But I actually see that as a really, I guess I can't call it well planned, but you have enough years of experience that you're in a good place to be an advocate for the things that you believe in, the things that you believe in being good medical care, quality medical care at a price that people can afford. So it seems to me that this was a really wise thing for you to do, and at the appropriate time. I get a little frustrated with some of the bloggers and opinionators that I see from time to time who have never practiced, and yet they're perfectly willing to tell us how it should be done. So I'm quite delighted that somebody with your experience has decided to move into that space. And I am assuming that it was in that atmosphere that the beginnings of professional practicing physicians of America came into being. Is that correct?
We started at the end of 2016 and came on in a splashy Library of Congress event at the beginning of 2017. But yes, it was along that journey.
All righty. And why did we need PP of A? Don't we have the American Medical Association?
Well, I'm a big believer in competition. And I think that we talked about trust before with patients.
Mm-hmm.
We should talk about trust among physicians. And I know actually I have many wonderful friends who are members or delegates of the AMA, and I wish them all the best, but I will say that I know many, many, many more people who don't trust the AMA.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever been a member of the AMA?
I think back in medical school, and by the way, it still works this way, but if you're a medical student, it's $20 a year for membership. And if you're a resident, I think it's $45. And if you're new, it's almost $500, $480, something like that. So when you're a medical student, everyone tells you, well, join the AMA so you can put it on your resume. And I believe there's actually a bunch of medical schools that'll pay for it for the 4 years. And you get a discount when you do the 4 years prorated. I may have been back in medical school, but I sure as heck haven't been since.
Just to possibly provide some fuel for the conversation, I'll give you a little bit of a personal story. When I went into private practice, I was immediately told it was very important for me to join the County Medical Society. I was in Clearwater, Florida at the time. So I went to that first meeting, and what I heard was it is absolutely imperative that you join the AMA. And I forget what the dues were, but it was in excess of $1,000 a year. In addition to that, it's very important that you contribute to the AMPAC, the Political Action Committee. They wanted money for that. And it is very important that you contribute to the County Medical Society Political Action Committee. So there's a lot of bucks in there. And after watching what I had gotten for my investment over a couple of years, I would say, it occurred to me that I was not really getting much return on investment. In fact, it appeared to be zero. The only thing that I could do is buy the CPT manual for a discounted price. So even in 1982, I and a lot of other people were having a really hard time understanding how that organization helped us. My impression is that has not really changed. I don't really know the figures, but I know that it is less than a majority of practicing physicians in the U.S. are members of that organization. If I'm wrong on that, you can certainly correct me. But I'm wondering if that was a similar experience of yours with respect to the AMA.
I am a member of my county medical society, and there's a role that I have there that I really enjoy.
And you're allowed to do that without being a member of the AMA?
Yes. I know at one point that changed in Pennsylvania. I don't know when that was. It was before I was involved, certainly. I think there are other states that you have to be an AMA member, and I think that's kind of crazy. It's like, conscription as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and I don't understand. I'm also a member of the Pennsylvania Medical Society, and I'm a delegate, and I've done that for 3 years. I have some great people I work with at the State Medical Society. I do tell people all the time that I think that if you want to do one thing to change healthcare in your corner of the world, join your state society. You do have to join. I think if you join the state, you're joining the county. Like those two things are tied together. I guess I don't mind that so much. I do think more people should get involved, and I think that when we look at politics, one of the main complaints nowadays, Randy, is that we have this group of establishment politicians on the right and the left, by the way, and we have the same thing in medical reform in some of these societies, not all. I mean, I'm a newer member, and I have had a lot of wonderful friendships and support from fantastic people at the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Can I mention a few?
Oh, please do. And I'm glad to hear
Yes.
that there is a state medical society that has earned somebody's confidence.
Yeah, so we have had some past presidents who are fantastic. One of them is Dr. Denai Powers, Dr. Chuck Cutler. Oh my goodness, fantastic! And I'm lucky enough that I live close by to Chuck. That if I have a, kind of a party of physicians, he's come sometimes. There's some people on the board that have been a tremendous help. Dr. Mark Lopatin, Dr. Jim Thomas. These are, and there's more people that I'm like forgetting that I really, Sherry Blumenthal, Dr. Sherry Blumenthal, an obstetrician, newly retired. And, have been people that have been supportive and helpful. And I just think the world of them. So
that's good to know.
Yeah. I think everyone should join their state medical society. That's one thing where, do it, get involved, get to know the people there. And instead of, just complaining and kvetching, which we all should do because it's bad out there, try to become involved and do something.
Good advice. So back to Practicing Physicians of America. What was the inspiration for, and what is the product of that organization?
Well, the inspiration was I had taken enough looks around and felt like, okay, I'm involved at the state level a little bit, but I don't think anything is happening at the national level. And especially what I didn't think was happening is having an organization that crossed multiple specialties. I mean, there's some really good stuff that happens with, some of the national level ER groups and orthopedic groups and others. But I didn't think there was one that was crossing specialties. And, I mentioned I'm married to a head and neck surgeon. I mean, so I'm married to a surgical subspecialist, and I'm a primary care doctor doing emergency type care stuff, right? We kind of cross boundaries. My brother's a cardiologist, and my father-in-law was. He passed on, God rest his soul, but he was a rheumatologist. So I've seen a bunch of different specialties, even within my own family. And I felt like it was time for a national organization that was action-oriented. So I called up Dr. Westby Fisher from Chicago, and boy, you should have him on your show at some point to talk about his work with maintenance of certification. He is a force of nature and has been a mentor to me. Actually, I didn't call him up. I called up Ken Fisher, another mentor, and a doctor who's passionate about knowing the history of how we got here. And when I called up Ken and I asked him to connect me to Wes and said, this is what I want to do. I think it's time. I think we're ripe for having an organization that's just going to get something done. Randy, I hear all the time from people that, physicians, they just let go of the profession and it's not possible to get it back. And I don't think that way at all. I think to myself, what's taking us so long?
Yeah.
So I think if I was going to ask that question, well, then the next logical step is to do something to put it together. So we gathered and we pulled in, we wanted to have people from different specialties. So Judith Thompson is a breast surgeon in Texas. Nirana Lajba is another pediatrician from Washington State. Brian Jamal Dixon is a child psychiatrist from Texas. And Craig Wax is an osteopathic doctor and a family practice physician from New Jersey. So we actually span the country. We're geographically diverse. Wes is from Chicago.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. And so we started that way. And we started we put on an event at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and we talked about maintenance of certification and the perils of quality measures and the need for more independent physicians. And this is 3 years ago, mind you, right? We talked, transparency came up in that talk. We were joined by someone who's always been a support to me personally and a joy to collaborate with, Marnie Jameson, Executive Director of Association of Independent Doctors. And you will not find a more ardent physician advocate than Marnie. And you will not find, well, you might find one or two now, but Marnie has been such an advocate for price transparency and transparency in where our money's going. So anyway, she joined us, and we talked about those things, plus an innovative model of healthcare delivery that Brian Jamal Dixon talked about. And that's when we splashed onto the scene. And we've been growing ever since.
So the idea, if I can capsulize it, is that you all felt that the physician voice with respect to healthcare policy had been somewhat muted. Do you have an opinion on why that came about?
Here's what I think about how we lost our role as the stewards of medicine. And a friend of mine actually pointed out it's better to use the word steward than leader. We're stewards of this profession, but slowly over decades, from the time I was in medical school and even before, we've been taken over by a glut of forces that have consolidated and corporatized. Not that there's anything wrong with making profits, but they've made it less about the patient and more about churning out, profits and numbers. And those people who are in charge of all those gigantic, now consolidated corporate entities, those people are controlling the narrative because they've ended up with the money in their pockets, and they're able to make sure that the rules are written in the way that favors them to become even more profitable. He who holds the gold makes the rules.
Indeed. And again, looking at the evolution of my experience in practice, when I started practice in 1980, hospital administrators typically deferred to or demurred to physicians with respect to making policy on patient care. And over that period of time, what I witnessed is the, I believe, mistaken notion that physicians were not smart enough to deal with these huge economic changes that were happening in the medical world. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think the number of healthcare administrators in the U.S. has increased by something like 3,000% over the past 20 years, and the increase in the number of physicians is substantially less than that. It has increased at about the same rate as the increase of the population. But in any case, we found ourselves being managed by people who had no involvement in what we're doing. And it appears to me that was a critical mistake. And what I hear you saying is that we needed a voice, a method to get the attention of those people who were having an undue influence over what we do. And that's everything from the rules on numbers of days that a patient can stay in the hospital, right up to where they can buy their prescription medications and so forth. But the change is something that none of us even began to think about in 1980. When I began my practice, we very innocently presumed that there were people better qualified to address the economics, and obviously it was a critical mistake. And it sounds to me as if PP of A is trying to address exactly that issue. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. So it's one of the things that we're trying to address. I mean, encapsulated, physicians, medicine is our house. Give us the right to practice as we were trained, and please don't let the door hit you on your way out.
Mm-hmm.
But, decades ago, people began to realize that the healthcare pie was juicy and quite sweet. And they swooped in. And I don't think they thought we were too stupid. I think they just thought they needed to control us. And they've done that very effectively because we've remained divided. And, we talked about trust, and there's certainly enough people that aren't going to trust some of the established medical advocacy organizations because of perverse incentives that they hold. You mentioned yourself, owning the CPT codes. I find that a problem. I think others do too. So how do we fix this? Well, we organize, and then we regain our seat at the table. And along the way, I think we have to be careful that we're making sure we clean out our own house thoroughly. And, you really should talk
Excellent point.
Yes, Wes Fisher on a later podcast about the maintenance of certification, because that's quite a dirty little corner of our house right now.
Very, yeah.
So I think to draw together, but then once we do that and we have some good people who are accountable and who uphold the Hippocratic Oath and who are doing this for the right reasons, who are building a seat at the table, and I'll add. So I do a lot of writing, a lot of speaking, a lot of traveling, and I don't take speaking fees. I don't take honorariums for my writing. And I think that's probably better. Someone told me, another mentor, Dick Armstrong, wonderful surgeon in Michigan. I miss him terribly. Dick Armstrong told me it would be best for you never to take money when you are suggesting healthcare reform measures. And I've held to that.
There is just a tremendous amount of wisdom in that advice, I think, and kudos to him for making the suggestion. And I don't even know how to say how admirable it is that you have taken that approach, because, as we know, that is not always the case. So, again, thank you for that.
Well, don't feel
effort.
sorry for me, because honestly, I had that full ride to medical school. We started medical school. It was $13,000 a year in 1990 at Duke. I don't have loans, and I kind of look upon this, and I went through something personal. Should I share?
Oh, please do.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I'm the only daughter with, among 5 children, and I experienced some very poor care with my mother. I was already involved in trying to figure out what was disintegrating about the system. And when I saw what happened to my mother at a very tender time for me, it was only 3 weeks after my father had passed. I knew I had to ramp up my efforts, and it was just a conscious decision. And I always have sort of felt as though, everyone has their ideas, Randy. I mean, I'm a Catholic and a practicing Catholic, and more than that, I'm a believer. I think that was sent to me. And my mother was an extraordinary woman, just so energetic and full of life, and a real community volunteer and organizer. And I think she would have done that again gladly if she knew that the end result was that we would help people.
Well, Dr. Marion Mass, I have really enjoyed hearing about your professional journey. And at this point, I want to move along into what is my favorite part of the program, and that is where we hear some personal thoughts from you about prescriptions for success. So I'm going to close my mic and sit quietly while we listen as Dr. Marion Mass gives us her prescription for success.
All right, wonderful. And actually, before I start, I don't think we've mentioned this, and I want to do it not just for me, because the success that I've had is the success of Practicing Physicians of America and my board members that I mentioned, and the other groups with whom we collaborate. PPA has several thousand members, and they're loyal to us. And the PPA has also collaborated with and is now part of a larger consortium, the Free to Care Network. The Free to Care Network took off really in April after we did the Free to Care conference. I and others from multiple groups wrote a white paper on how to reduce healthcare cost and how to reduce waste and increase access. And that paper has been accepted and read by many senators across the aisle and congressmen across the aisle. I think members of the administration have read it. And now, because of that paper, there's a network of groups, and altogether those groups comprise over 37,000 physicians and 3 million patients, and that's grown since mainly last April. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm proud of my work. I'm proud of all of us because we're working together. I mean, this is the dream of physicians, being able to gather, organize, and then build a seat at the table and have legislators listen and consider our ideas. So with that, I think you want, what's a prescription for success? All right. Be genuine. Just be you. And I think, especially nowadays, with people not trusting each other, you'll trust someone that you get the idea is genuine. I'm just a real person. I'm as prone to mistakes as everyone else. I've driven away from the gas station with the gas pump connected to my car and pulled the whole gas pump out. And my immediate response to this is, besides carrying it into the Wawa convenience store, is to lay it on the ground, admit what I did, and then take a picture of it and post it on Facebook and, tell everyone, look, I do dumb things. We all do dumb things. Let's get over it. In our modern world, I think people spend too much time trying to look perfect. It's having a bad effect on our youth. And being genuine is where it's at. The other thing that I would say I think is important for success is to take breaks. I guess I didn't know it, but going to Greece, that was taking a break. I've always made room for hobbies. That came from my father-in-law. My parents, too, they had hobbies, but my father-in-law told both my husband and I, make sure you have hobbies. You need to have something to do when you retire, and it's good to have a break. So what do? I run. I garden. We have a giant organic produce garden in our backyard. And my kids have actually gotten involved. They started a vegetable stand, only after they started helping and sold produce, and they ran the garden as a charity project. And then it was also nice too, because we gardened together as a family. So it's our way of taking a break and doing something very real while we're doing it. And then I garden because I cook, and I cook because when I was a resident, my husband was never home. So I got to trot around Chicago and learn how to cook. And my real guilty pleasure is I thrift shop, which I know that sounds really silly, but we have great thrift shops here in Bucks County, and I grew up with very little money. And then I was in school for a long time. I was always about saving a buck. And, that mom of mine ran a thrift shop for our local library. So it was my habit to thrift shop, and I've never let it go. So when I do all these trips to Washington, D.C., sometimes I leave a label on in the jackets that I'm wearing, and people will say, what a gorgeous blazer. And I'm like, well, thank you. It's Anne Klein. Look, I paid $3, and I'll pull out the label. I know that sounds silly, but I just get a kick out of it. That thrift shopping is my break, and I just enjoy it. So other things that I think will help you be successful: don't compromise your principles. There's warts and gems in this world, and I think we'd be a much better world if the warts and the gems would just reveal themselves, openly and transparently. We all have a set of principles, and we all should be able to live with ourselves and how we conduct ourselves. But not compromising your principles, that's right there. For me, it's kind of simple stuff. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. I mean, I think it's the basics, really. And then the last one, I think it goes along with not compromising your principles. No one ever really succeeds by pushing someone else down to lift themselves up. We do so much better when we lift others. And I want to mention some people that I know that I think are so wonderful at this. A wonderful retired anesthesiologist in Tennessee, Baja Jenkins. Another pediatrician in Minnesota, Christina Dewey. Donna Coriel. She's actually left clinical medicine and she's running something called Doctors on Social Media. On Twitter, it's SoMeDocs. And she is one of the most positive, uplifting people that I know. Dr. Marlene Woost-Smith, another pediatrician, actually from Pennsylvania. She's now the editor of a magazine called Physician Outlook, and she's just doing a fantastic job. And there's more. I know there's other people. Dr. I'm totally remiss if I don't lift up mightily, although she doesn't need lifting. She's already floating. Dr. Kim Jackson of Physicians Working Together. And I participate in their social media group, and they're an incorporated group of their own. They're doing wonderful things, and they're responsible for National Physicians Week. By the way, we have a week. We don't just have a day. And National Physicians Week is going to be March 25th through April 1st. And it is always March 25th through April 1st. It's a thing now, and it's every year. So there's other people that are wonderful at lifting others up, and I just can't think of them right now. I've mentioned some throughout the podcast, and I really wanted to make sure those people were mentioned. And I'm sorry to everyone that I forgot. So thinking through prescription for success, be genuine, take breaks, don't compromise your principles, and lift others up. That's my prescription.
Well, Dr. Marion Mass, thank you so much for sharing that wisdom with us. That's very inspiring, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before we go, I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell our audience how they can follow you with email address, website, Twitter handles, whatever you would like to share with us, please.
Okay, absolutely. So you can find Practicing Physicians of America at practicingphysician.org. Take a Google search on that one right there. I am on LinkedIn under my real name, Marion Mass. Keep it genuine. I'm at Twitter. There's one profile that got shut down when I started writing a lot. I think I must have been on to someone by then. But I'm currently on Twitter at Mass_Marion. And I'm on Facebook on my real name. If people want to friend me, I make sure that I prefer them to, they be people I know. And you can find some more information about me if you want a good biography. There's something called the Doctors on Social Media Data Bank, the SoMe Data Bank. It's a wonderful thing for physicians to join. So when you go to Doctors on Social Media, you can look up underneath, I'm a doctor, there's a SoMeDocs data bank. And you can, when you join SoMeDocs, you can make your profile, and then you almost get kind of like a bio page, which is great. And then the last place you can look for me, I've published in a number of newspapers, once in the Wall Street Journal. It was a great honor and a thrill. Several times in the publication The Hill, the Washington Times, the Washington Examiner. But I serve as a volunteer on the editorial board of my county newspaper, the Bucks County Courier-Times, and the Doylestown Intelligencer. And I'm in the middle of writing a whole series of pieces about healthcare costs. And I've written multiple other things for the Courier-Times and Intel. And I've learned along the way on this board that newspaper industry is no different than healthcare. They're consolidating, just as physicians are getting marginalized, so are reporters and editors. And it's been a joy working with the people at the editorial board there as well.
Dr. Mass, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a great pleasure, and I am looking forward to speaking to you again in the very near future.
It was my great pleasure. I am really looking forward to the next conversation. Thanks so much, Randy.
So that will wrap up another episode of Prescription for Success. But before we go, I want to invite you to visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com, where you can become a subscriber. And we'd also like for you to be a part of the podcast. Just visit the website, click on the Contact Us button on the top of the home page, then scroll to the bottom and click on the big red Record button. And finally, just go ahead and read us your own personal prescription for success. If you stumble, like I do occasionally, just start over, and we'll edit to make you sound great. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.